Weeks, Feast of Booths, Feast of First Fruits. They were called Sabbaths unto the Lord. And if you want to look them up, they're in a book called Leviticus, chapter 23. Then there was a 7th year sabbatical, and this one was a big one because it was all year long. And they rested for the whole year. Everyone say, I want me some of that. They rested for a whole year. They weren't allowed to farm or anything. And all debts were also cancelled. So if you had a mortgage, it only ever lasted 7 years. Get in. But then there was one more. Does anyone know what that one was?
Jubilee.
Thank you. The year of Jubilee, which happens every 50th year. This was a big one. Nobody worked. Every debt was cleared. Anyone who had sold themselves into slavery or had become a slave was set free. Any land that had been sold was given back to the original owner. And amidst all of that, there was a big sing-song saying thank you to God almost every day. But again, all of these different Sabbaths point to one thing, don't they? Rhythm. A rhythm of work, a rhythm of rest, and a rhythm of play. Oh no, it's Mars bars, isn't it? Work, rest, and play. Work, rest, worship. A weekly rhythm, a monthly rhythm, a seasonal rhythm, a 7-yearly rhythm, and a 50-year rhythm. And again, it's not just on rest, it's on godly rest. So all of these Sabbaths were created to build a rhythm of thankfulness and worship to God. That is their point. Exodus 31, God says, be careful to keep my Sabbaths. For the Sabbath is a sign of the covenant between me and you from generation to generation, says God. It is given so that you may know that I am the Lord who makes you holy. So the Sabbath rule is given for rest and relaxation, not rules and regulations, which is what the Israelites had turned it into by Jesus' day. They were bound up with 300 rules just to make sure they didn't muff up their Saturday. But God gave the Israelites the Sabbath rule for freedom, to signify his relationship with them and to remind them and to remind you that you have been set free from toil. So at the end of the day, taking a Sabbath rest, if you think about it, is actually about trust. Do we trust God enough to actually rest in him? To stop what we are doing and trust that A, he will keep it all going without us. O, the ego in that statement. And B, that he will actually provide for us whilst we rest. Because if he didn't, how on earth could you have a 7-year and a 50-year year of Jubilee where no one did now and they still got fed? So finally then, let's look at the Sabbath blessing. As I've already said, by Jesus' day, the Sabbath was anything but a blessing. By this point, it was like a millstone around people's head, and the Sabbath police would be prancing around every Saturday, making sure that people weren't doing things they shouldn't be doing on Sabbath, like helping some poor person out of a ditch. You can't do that on a Sabbath. That's work, they would say. And all of these extra rules had become a millstone around their heads. The religious people of Jesus' day frequently accused Jesus of breaking the 4th commandment. And there's one occasion where it's recorded where we see this happen. Jesus and his followers, they're walking through a field and his followers are rubbing their hands together. They're rubbing some grain together. And they ate it. Oh my giddy aunt. Now, according to the religious leaders of Jesus' day, rubbing grains together and eating them was a Sabbath no-no. So the Pharisees accused Jesus of being a heretic, a bit like Bel, there we are, and breaking the 4th commandment. And this is what Jesus says in response. The Sabbath was made to meet the needs of the people, and not the people to meet the requirements of the Sabbath. The Son of Man is Lord even over the Sabbath. In other words, the Sabbath was meant to be a blessing, not a curse. It's for our benefit, not the other way round. Godly rest is a blessing. It is not a waste of time. And what Jesus was breaking was the man-made traditions around the fourth commandment that don't exist. He was not saying don't have one. He was saying have one the right way. The Apostle Paul continues this discussion in the book of Colossians, where he says this: don't let anybody condemn you for what you eat or drink, or for not celebrating certain holy days or new moon ceremonies, or what? Or Sabbaths. For these rules are only shadows of the reality yet to come. And Christ himself is that reality. So I think we could rewrite these verses today to say this: don't let anyone condemn you if you work on a Sunday. What day you work does not matter. What day you have for God's rest does not matter, as long as you have it. But the real jewel in these verses is this realization that Sabbath rest actually finds its complete fulfillment where? In Jesus. That's what it actually says. Paul says that the rule of the Sabbath is just a foreshadow or a foretaste of the fullness of rest that you can find in a relationship with Jesus. And the writer in Hebrews emphasizes this rest in chapter 4. He says there is a special Sabbath rest still waiting for the people of God. For all who have entered into God's rest have rested from their labors, just as God did after creating the world. So let us do our best, it says, to enter into that rest. You can't do that if you are running at 150% all the time, can you? It's impossible. Part of that special Sabbath rest is still yet to come. It's part of the great rest that is promised to everybody, that in eternity we will spend lives of rest. But it's not reserved for the future solely. Because he says in verse 7 this: God has set a time for entering into his rest, and that time is when? It's now. We experience special Sabbath rest now when we set a time, special time for God. And in Matthew chapter 11, Jesus personally offers you this rest right now. This is what he says: come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will, not might or could, I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, says Jesus. Let me teach you, in brackets, what rest really is, because I am humble and gentle of heart, and you will find rest for your souls. It's not an if, it's not a maybe, it is a definite. So what is Jesus' yoke? I think it's freedom from striving, because Jesus has done it all. Isn't that good news? Jesus has done it all already. He's paid the great price. There's nothing you can do to make God love you more or less. So what on earth are you striving for? Recognition? From whom? More stuff? Why? Jesus is the greatest prize you can ever get. Now, listen to this slap around the face quote. When you begin to relinquish your ego, you will no longer feel compelled to prove to people how busy you are in an attempt to validate your sense of worth. Whoa, that's brutal. In other words, get over yourself, you're not that important. He is. Jesus has already set your worth. Where? On the cross. Do not deny his sacrifice by looking for it somewhere else, even in busyness. So I'm going to close with a remedy to all of this busyness, which is this: the value of the God pause. The value of just pausing and spending time with God. The only answer to busyness is to regularly, consciously work in times of pause to let God in. What does Galatians 5 verse 1 tell us? Anybody know? It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of what? Slavery. What's the fourth commandment about? Being set free from a yoke of slavery. Slavery to work. So why should we regularly take a Sabbath pause then? Well, the first and biggest reason is this. Because God's commanded you to. And God knows best. But there's also these reasons as well. It's good for us physically, mentally, and spiritually. It will give us room to reflect and readjust our lives around God. It actually makes a statement about who and what is important to us. What's the most valuable asset you have got? Is it your bank account? Is it your house? Is it your phone? It is your time. It is your time that is your most valuable asset. So what does it say to God when you say, have some of my time? It deliberately dethrones busyness from being central to our existence. And the fifth one, it reminds us that we are not indispensable. If you stop, things will still keep going. So that's why. But the if, when, how you find the time, that is 100% up to you. I am not in control of your schedule. God is not in control of your schedule. You are. Sort it out. Only you can sort it out. I cannot. God has given us a principle, a rule, and a blessing in a Sabbath rest. It's up to you whether you take him up on it or not. I can't make you. I wish I could. My life would be a lot easier. I get my Sabbath rest every morning for about 15 to 30 minutes. I get up bonkers early. I get up at 4 o'clock. Because that's the only time I can definitely say I can set that time apart for God. I go and get a cup of coffee. I sit down and I say, come on in. What do you want to say to me today? Sometimes there's nothing. Sometimes it's an absolutely amazing time. But if I never set that time apart, I'd never hear from God, would I? And then on top of that, when I can, I go for a big long walk with the dogs and I give that time to God, keeping one eye on the spaniel because she runs off. That's what works for me. I am not telling you to go and buy a spaniel. You have got to find out a rhythm that works for you, but you have got to find it if you want to keep your relationship with God number one. Isaiah chapter 40, and I've nearly finished, verse 31 says this. You all know this verse. But those who wait, not waiting with one eye on your to-do list, not waiting with one foot hovering over the gas pedal. I'm ready to go. Just hurry up and get this over and done with, God. Not waiting with a mind full of worry about all that still needs to be done. Not waiting while worrying about how the world is ever going to cope without you for 5 minutes. Or how your family's going to cope if you're not working flat out. It's waiting that is intentional, still, and wholly focused on God. They that wait on the Lord like that will find new strength. They will soar high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. And those that don't, won't. So if you're knackered right now, you ask yourself, why? Because here's the remedy to not be. I'm going to leave you with a final quote. I want you to ponder it for a minute before we carry on. You ready? If I really want an unrushed life, I must underwhelm my schedule so God has room to overwhelm my soul. Amen. Don't clap, I hate it.
That was great, wasn't it? Really, really excellent. Thank you, Paul, for serving us so well. I feel like the kids have done incredibly well. Well done, kids. I think, can we have a song? Is that okay, band? And then we let the kids shake some instruments and move around before we come to communion together.